Discover the captivating tale of Prince Alexander of Greece, a royal figure whose life unfolded like a dramatic epic from the annals of European history. Born into a world of glittering palaces and intricate family alliances, Alexander's journey from a spirited young prince to an unexpected king is filled with intrigue, ambition, and heartache. Amidst the turbulence of global conflicts and shifting alliances, he navigated a throne fraught with isolation and power struggles, all while chasing personal passions that defied convention. What secrets did his royal upbringing hold? How did he rise to power in a nation torn by division? Explore the scandals that rocked his court, the bold decisions that reshaped borders, and the forbidden love that challenged centuries-old traditions. Prince Alexander's story is one of triumph, tragedy, and timeless legacy, a reminder of how one man's choices can echo through generations. Dive into this riveting biography to uncover the man behind the crown. Whether you're a history enthusiast or new to Greek royalty, Prince Alexander's life promises twists that will keep you hooked. Read on to reveal the full narrative of this enigmatic prince and his enduring impact on Greece. Early life and family, 1893 to 1917. Royal background and distinctive personality. Alexander came into the world on August 1st, 1893, under the Gregorian calendar, which corresponded to July 20th on the older Julian calendar still used in some Orthodox contexts. His birthplace was the Tatoi Palace, a prominent summer residence for the Greek royal family located in the outskirts of Athens within the Kingdom of Greece. This palace served as more than just a home. It functioned as a private estate encompassing vast grounds, including forests, gardens, and buildings designed for leisure and escape from the urban pressures of the capital. Constructed in the late 19th century, Tatoi was equipped with modern amenities for its time, such as running water and expansive stables reflecting the blend of traditional Greek elements with European influences that characterized the monarchy. The choice of Tatoi for his birth likely stemmed from its cooler climate during the summer months, providing a serene environment away from Athens' heat and political bustle. This setting not only offered physical comfort, but also symbolized the insulated world of royalty, where young Alexander would spend much of his early childhood amidst nature, engaging in outdoor activities that fostered his energetic personality. As the second son of Crown Prince Constantine of Greece, who later became King Constantine I, and Princess Sophia of Prussia, Alexander occupied a position in the family hierarchy that placed him behind his older brother in the line of succession, but still within the core of royal responsibilities. His father's lineage traced back to King George III of Greece, a Danish prince elected to the throne in 1863 following Greece's independence from Ottoman rule, and Queen Olga Konstantinovna, a member of the Russian imperial family, as a granddaughter of Tsar Nicholas I. This paternal side infused Alexander's upbringing with a mix of Scandinavian practicality from George III's origins and Russian Orthodox traditions from Olga, including religious observances and cultural practices like elaborate family feasts tied to the Eastern calendar. On his mother's side, Sophia was the offspring of Emperor Frederick III of Germany, whose brief reign in 1888 was marked by liberal leanings, and Victoria, the eldest daughter of Britain's Queen Victoria. This maternal connection brought in British Victorian values of duty and empire building, alongside Prussian military discipline, creating a household where multiple languages, Greek, German, English, and possibly French, were spoken fluently, exposing Alexander to diverse perspectives from an early age. These extensive familial ties extended Alexander's relations to key figures across Europe, embedding him in a network of monarchs whose decisions influence global events. Through his British links via his grandmother Victoria, he was related to King George V of the United Kingdom, who ascended in 1910 and navigated the empire through the early 20th century's upheavals, sharing a common great-grandmother in Queen Victoria. This connection likely meant occasional correspondence or visits that highlighted themes of constitutional monarchy and naval power. Emperor Nicholas II of Russia, a first cousin to both of Alexander's parents, through Olga on the paternal side and shared Romanov-Hohenzollern ties on the maternal, represented the autocratic splendor of the Tsarist court, with its vast palaces and intricate court etiquette, but also the underlying instabilities that would lead to revolution. Nicholas's family provided a Slavic dimension, including Orthodox rituals that reinforced Alexander's religious education. Additionally, Emperor Wilhelm II of Germany, Sophia's brother and thus Alexander's maternal uncle, embodied the aggressive militarism of the Second Reich, with his focus on army expansion and colonial ambitions. Family interactions with Wilhelm might have involved discussions on strategy and technology, given his interest in modern inventions. These relationships were not merely genealogical. They facilitated diplomatic alliances, such as mutual support in Balkan affairs or shared intelligence on European tensions, placing Alexander in a position where personal family matters could intersect with state policies, instilling in him an early awareness of international dynamics and the burdens of royal interconnectivity. In terms of immediate family dynamics, Alexander developed a particularly close relationship with his younger sister Helen, born in 1896, who became a constant companion in his childhood exploits. Their bond was characterized by shared playtime, mutual support during family events, and a level of trust that allowed for confiding secrets away from the more formal aspects of palace life. Helen's presence provided emotional stability, especially in a large family where attention was divided. Conversely, his relationship with his older brother George, born in 1890, and the future King George II, was marked by a noticeable lack of intimacy due to fundamental differences in temperament and interests. George exhibited a reserved, contemplative demeanor suited to his role as heir, often immersing himself in studies or solitary reflection, which contrasted sharply with Alexander's vibrant approach to life. This divergence created a natural gap where shared activities were minimal and interactions might have been limited to obligatory family gatherings, fostering a sense of independence in Alexander while highlighting the pressures on George as the primary successor. Alexander's personality stood out distinctly from that of his siblings, particularly George, who was serious and introspective from a young age, traits that aligned with expectations for a future ruler. In contrast, Alexander displayed an extroverted, playful disposition that often manifested in mischievous behaviors, making him a lively presence in the household. One notable incident involved him crafting makeshift cigarettes from blotting paper, a common office supply in the palace, which he would roll and attempt to smoke, demonstrating an early curiosity about adult habits and a willingness to experiment despite potential disapproval from tutors or parents. This act of rebellion, though childish, revealed a creative streak and a disregard for conventional boundaries, possibly leading to stern lectures on safety and propriety. Another episode saw him inadvertently igniting a fire in the palace playroom, likely while playing with matches or flammable materials during a game, resulting in smoke-filled rooms, panicked servants rushing to extinguish the flames, and perhaps minor damage to toys or furniture. Such an event would have underscored the need for supervision in a royal setting, where even small accidents could escalate due to the opulence of surroundings. Furthermore, in a particularly memorable mishap, Alexander lost control while operating a toy car, causing his younger brother Paul, born in 1901, to be ejected and fall approximately 1.8 meters into a bush. This height equated to a significant drop, akin to tumbling from a low balcony, potentially causing bruises, scratches from thorns, and emotional distress for Paul, while alerting the family to Alexander's impulsive tendencies. These incidents, far from being isolated, illustrated a pattern of adventurous risk-taking that energized family life, but also required constant vigilance from nannies and guards, ultimately shaping Alexander's reputation as the family's spirited member and teaching him lessons in responsibility through consequences. Despite being third in the line of succession, following his father Constantine and brother George, Alexander's education received thorough attention and substantial resources, reflecting the monarchy's commitment to preparing all princes for potential roles in governance or military service. His instructional plan was customized from early childhood, incorporating private tutors who covered subjects like history, languages, mathematics, and etiquette, with an emphasis on Greek heritage to instill national pride. Unlike George, whose military education included training in Germany to absorb Prussian rigor and tactical expertise, Alexander remained in Greece for his schooling, allowing him to develop a stronger connection to local customs and institutions. He enrolled in the Hellenic Military Academy, a renowned establishment founded in 1828 that trained elite officers through a rigorous curriculum, combining theoretical studies in strategy, fortifications, and leadership with practical exercises in drill, horsemanship, and weaponry. At the academy, Alexander distinguished himself not through exceptional academic achievements and intellectual pursuits, but via his proficiency in mechanical disciplines. He excelled in understanding and manipulating machinery, such as disassembling and reassembling engines or firearms during workshops, which honed his problem-solving skills and hands-on aptitude. This focus on mechanics likely derived from innate curiosity, setting him apart from peers and earning recognition among instructors for his innovative approaches to technical challenges. This mechanical inclination extended profoundly to automobiles, emerging technologies at the turn of the century that captivated forward-thinking individuals. Alexander's fascination with cars encompassed their engineering principles, from internal combustion engines to chassis design, and he immersed himself in learning about models like early Mercedes or Fiats imported from Europe. As one of the earliest automobile owners in Greece, he acquired a vehicle around the early 1910s, when such possessions were rarities, symbolizing modernity and wealth. Driving through Athens's cobblestone streets or the palace grounds, he would have experienced the thrill of speed, reaching perhaps 30 to 40 kilometers per hour, and the sensory rush of wind and engine noise, contrasting sharply with traditional horse-drawn carriages. Maintenance became a personal hobby. He often worked in the garage, oiling parts, adjusting carburetors, and troubleshooting issues, activities that dirtied his hands but provided a tangible sense of accomplishment. This passion not only modernized his image within royal circles, but also aligned with his extroverted nature, as he might have shared rides with friends or family, turning excursions into social events that bridge the gap between aristocracy and emerging technological progress. Transitioning into adulthood, Alexander's capabilities were prominently displayed during his initial military engagements in the Balkan Wars, Spanning 1912 to 1913, conflicts aimed at liberating territories from Ottoman control and expanding Greek borders. As a junior officer, he was positioned on the battlefield staff with his brother George, operating under the direct command of their father, Crown Prince Constantine, who orchestrated operations with strategic acumen. This familial command structure allowed Alexander to observe high-level decision-making firsthand, including map reviews, troop deployments, and logistical planning amid challenging terrains, like mountains and rivers. Specifically, he contributed to the Army of Thessaly's campaign, a force comprising infantry, cavalry, and artillery units that advanced northward. His involvement in the capture of Thessaloniki in October 1912 was crucial. The city, a multicultural hub with significant economic and symbolic value, was seized after intense maneuvers outflanking Bulgarian and Ottoman forces, involving coordinated assaults and sieges that tested endurance under fire and adverse weather. Alexander's role likely included relaying orders, scouting positions, and participating in the triumphant entry, experiences that built his confidence in combat and deepened family unity through shared victories. However, this period of success was overshadowed by profound loss when King George I, Alexander's grandfather, was assassinated on March 18, 1913, in Thessaloniki shortly after its liberation. The king, while strolling unguarded to foster public rapport, was shot at close range by Alexandros Shinas, an anarchist motivated by personal grievances and broader anti-monarchical sentiments. This event sent shockwaves through Europe, highlighting vulnerabilities in royal security amid rising nationalism and social unrest. The immediate aftermath involved mourning rituals, state funerals attended by international dignitaries, and a swift transition as Constantine ascended to the throne as King Constantine I. For Alexander, the assassination served as a stark education in the perils of leadership, reinforcing the transient nature of power and the need for caution in public engagements, while solidifying his commitment to military duties as Greece navigated the war's conclusions and prepared for future conflicts. Accession and the Puppet King reign, 1917 to 1920. Isolation on the throne. King Constantine I, Alexander's father, navigated Greece through the tumultuous years of World War I by adhering to a policy of official neutrality, yet he openly expressed sympathies toward Germany that went beyond mere diplomatic posturing. These inclinations were deeply embedded in his personal and familial circumstances, as his marriage to Sophia of Prussia created direct ties to the German imperial family, positioning Kaiser Wilhelm II as his brother-in-law through Sophia's lineage. Constantine perceived Germany not as an aggressor, but as a potential protector, a strategic ally that could shield Greece from immediate dangers, such as Bulgarian expansionism in the Balkans, a region still raw from the conflicts of the Balkan Wars in 1912 to 1913, where Greece had secured significant territorial victories. He reasoned that entanglement in the broader European war would exhaust the nation's resources, potentially undoing those gains and exposing Greece to further vulnerabilities without guaranteed benefits. In stark contrast stood Prime Minister Eleftherios Venizelos, a dynamic figure hailing from Crete, renowned for his rhetorical prowess and ambitious nationalistic agenda. Venizelos advocated fervently for aligning Greece with the Entente powers, comprising Britain, France, and Russia, envisioning this partnership as the pathway to realizing the Megali idea, the long-standing aspiration to unify all Greek-speaking populations under one banner, incorporating regions like Asia Minor, Thrace, and various Aegean territories still under Ottoman control. This vision promised not just territorial growth, but a revival of Hellenic glory, appealing to patriotic sentiments across the spectrum. The opposition between Constantine's prudent restraint and Venizelos's bold expansionism transcended simple policy differences, morphing into the national schism, a profound societal fracture that segmented Greece into two camps: the royalists, who clustered around Constantine in Athens and emphasized stability and tradition, often drawing from conservative urban elites and military traditionalists, and the Venizelists, who mobilized support from Crete, the islands, and progressive intellectuals, championing intervention as a historic opportunity. This schism permeated all layers of Greek life, influencing military loyalties where units might defect based on allegiance, disrupting economic activities through boycotts and strikes, and even infiltrating social interactions, where families divided over dinner tables and propaganda leaflets flooded streets, each side branding the other as traitors to the nation's future. As the year 1916 progressed, the schism escalated from verbal sparring into tangible division and confrontation. Venizelos, bolstered by the protective umbrella of intent diplomats and military personnel who viewed him as a reliable partner, audaciously established a parallel government in Thessaloniki on September 25, 1916. This entity, dubbed the Government of National Defense, asserted control over northern Greece, including vital areas like Macedonia, and unapologetically aligned itself with the Allied cause, mobilizing resources and manpower to support the war effort against the Central Powers. Far from being a paper administration, it commanded its own armed forces, the Army of National Defense, which actively recruited volunteers, trained them in Allied camps, and engaged in skirmishes with Royalist troops, thereby exacerbating internal strife and turning parts of Greece into contested zones. Concurrently, Entente forces conducted occupations across Greek territory to safeguard their strategic interests, particularly the supply lines feeding the Macedonian front where Allied armies confronted Bulgarian and German positions. French contingents established dominance in regions around Corinth and sections of the Peloponnese, enforcing control through checkpoints and patrols. British units consolidated hold over Crete and select islands, utilizing them as naval bases. These interventions extended to imposing strict curfews that restricted civilian movement after dark, requisitioning essential goods like foodstuffs and vehicles for military use, and occasionally leading to armed confrontations with resistant locals who viewed the foreigners as invaders rather than liberators. Such measures intensified economic difficulties, manifesting in acute shortages of staples like bread and oil, rampant inflation that eroded savings, and widespread unemployment as trade routes were disrupted. In Athens, Constantine's administration contended with escalating public dissent, amplified by Venizelist media campaigns that depicted the king and his circle as subservient to German interests, while royalist outlets retaliated by accusing Venizelos of selling out national sovereignty for personal gain. Compounding this political turmoil was a deeply personal catastrophe for the royal family in July 1916, when a ferocious fire ravaged Tatoi Palace, their cherished summer retreat on the outskirts of Athens. The conflagration ignited during the night of July 30th, propelled by the arid summer conditions and gusty winds that accelerated its spread through the palace's timber frameworks, antique tapestries, and opulent interiors, reducing much of the structure to ashes before firefighters could intervene. Awakened by blaring alarms and the acrid smell of smoke, the family evacuated in panic, clad only in night attire and grasping whatever valuables they could in the chaos. Alexander emerged physically unscathed, but the ordeal was harrowing, with flames licking at escape routes and structural collapses threatening lives. Queen Sophia exemplified extraordinary valor in the midst of the inferno, re-entering the blazing building to rescue her daughter, Princess Catherine, lifting the child from her bed as embers rained down and navigating through smoke-filled hallways to deliver her to safety outside. Investigations hinted at arson, potentially orchestrated by Venizelist operatives or Entente sympathizers aiming to demoralize Constantine and hasten his downfall. Though definitive evidence remained elusive amid the political fog, regardless of origin, the destruction of Tatoi not only deprived the family of a sanctuary, but also amplified their sense of encirclement, underscoring how the national crisis had infiltrated the most intimate spheres of royal existence, with reconstruction efforts stalled by budgetary constraints and ongoing instability. The decisive rupture occurred in June 1917, marking the irreversible shift in Greece's wartime trajectory. On June 10th, Charles Jonart, serving as the Entente's High Commissioner in Greece, a role endowed with sweeping authority by the Allied coalition, issued an unequivocal ultimatum to Constantine, demanding his immediate abdication. Jonart, a seasoned French diplomat known for his uncompromising demeanor, backed this command with formidable military leverage. Allied warships anchored menacingly off the port of Piraeus, their cannons poised for potential bombardment, while ground forces stood ready for amphibious assaults that could precipitate chaotic urban warfare and substantial civilian losses in Athens. Constantine engaged in protracted high-stakes negotiations, conducted in confidential sessions where he bartered for guarantees of safe passage abroad, financial provisions to sustain his family in exile, and assurances against reprisals for his supporters. Ultimately, he acquiesced but strategically avoided a formal abdication, framing his withdrawal as a compelled exile rather than a permanent forfeiture, thereby preserving the legal groundwork for a future reclamation of the throne under altered circumstances. This distinction proved critical, enabling royalists to later contest the legitimacy of the succession on grounds of coercion. The Entente's objectives were straightforward yet calculated. Constantine's removal was essential to eliminate what they perceived as a pro-German impediment to fully integrating Greece into the Allied war machine. Yet they shunned the establishment of a republic, apprehensive that such a radical transformation might incite similar upheavals elsewhere in Europe, particularly in the wake of Russia's February Revolution, which had already toppled the Tsarist regime and introduced volatile democratic experiments. Maintaining a monarchical framework ensured continuity and mitigated risks of broader instability in the Balkans, a theater already fraught with ethnic tensions and shifting alliances. The process of selecting Constantine's successor was laden with deliberate exclusions and compromises. Crown Prince George, Alexander's elder brother and the presumptive heir, was promptly disqualified. His extensive military education in Germany, fluency in the language, and alignment with his father's geopolitical perspectives rendered him an unacceptable continuation of the status quo in the eyes of the Entente, who feared he would perpetuate neutrality or subtle sabotage. Subsequently, Constantine's brother Prince George, Alexander's uncle, was propositioned, but he resolutely declined, his decision anchored in unwavering fraternal devotion. Accepting the throne under these conditions would, in his view, constitute a profound betrayal of Constantine, whom he regarded as the rightful sovereign, prioritizing familial bonds over any temptation of power. With these avenues closed, the Entente turned to Prince Alexander, Constantine's second son, whose youth at 23 years, relative detachment from entrenched political factions, and background in military service without overt pro-German affiliations made him appear as a compliant intermediary. His appointment was driven by practicality rather than acclaim, positioning him as a placeholder to uphold the monarchy's facade while advancing Allied imperatives. The deposition of Constantine did not garner universal endorsement within the Entente coalition. The provisional government in Russia, freshly instituted following the February Revolution, and still formally allied with Britain and France, issued an official objection, condemning the action as an egregious violation of Greek sovereignty that contradicted emerging principles of self-determination and anti-imperialism. Nevertheless, Russia's diminishing clout amid its internal revolutions allowed the more assertive British and French contingents to sideline these reservations, focusing instead on fortifying their position in the Balkans to counter German advances. Consequently, Alexander ascended as king of the Hellenes, inheriting a throne that symbolized entrapment more than empowerment, encircled by external dictates and internal hostilities. The ceremony marking his accession lacked any semblance of traditional splendor, underscoring the coerced and provisional nature of the transition. Held in the afternoon of June 11, 1917, within the grand ballroom of the Royal Palace in Athens, a space typically reserved for lavish receptions, but now echoing with subdued tension, Alexander pledged fidelity to the Greek constitution. The proceedings omitted all celebratory elements, no public spectacles, no throngs of well-wishers, no ornate regalia or musical accompaniments, confining the event to a sparse assembly. The participants were limited to Archbishop Theoclitus I of Athens, who delivered the oath with solemn ecclesiastical authority. The outgoing King Constantine, whose presence conveyed a mix of paternal concern and reluctant farewell through his steady gaze. Crown Prince George, maintaining a composed yet visibly strained demeanor, and Prime Minister Alexandros Zaimis, a pragmatic moderate ensnared in the unfolding drama, his attendance reflecting the awkward intersection of old and new regimes. At the age of 23, Alexander articulated the oath with a voice that faltered under emotional duress, his eyes brimming with tears that stemmed from a confluence of sorrow over familial disruption, apprehension about the uncertain path ahead, and an overwhelming sense of obligation to his heritage. He fully comprehended that authentic authority resided not with him, but in the hands of the Entente overlords and the ascendant Venizalist faction, while his father and brothers steadfastly refused to relinquish their entitlements, interpreting the succession as a transient imposition by occupiers. In a poignant aside prior to the rite, Constantine confided in Alexander, urging him to perceive his role strictly as that of a regent, a temporary steward safeguarding the throne for the dynasty's eventual restoration, thereby reinforcing a strategic narrative of continuity and resistance. In the immediate aftermath of the oath, the royal family sought to withdraw to Tatoi Palace for a measure of respite and reflection. But the streets of Athens ignited with spontaneous demonstrations from royalist adherents. Crowds amassed, obstructing thoroughfares and voicing vehement opposition to the enforced alteration, their chants invoking Constantine's name and denouncing the Entente's overreach as colonial arrogance. The charged environment teetered on the brink of violence, with potential for clashes between protesters and security forces. but escalation was narrowly avoided through restrained policing. The following day, Constantine and the accompanying family members executed a clandestine escape, employing discreet routes, possibly vehicular disguises, or nocturnal timing to evade detection and pursuit. This surreptitious exit signified the final instance of unmediated interaction for Alexander with his relatives. No subsequent family gatherings, no candid exchanges, only the prospect of communications filtered through censors or intermediaries, leaving him profoundly alone in a palace that now felt like an adversary's domain. Alexander's tenure, disparagingly termed the puppet king period, was characterized by an acute and multifaceted isolation that permeated his daily existence and decision-making. With his parents and siblings dispersed in exile, Constantine relocating to Switzerland where the strains of displacement exacerbated his health issues, and others finding refuge in Italy, they confronted challenges such as restricted finances, constant monitoring by host governments, and the emotional toll of separation from homeland and kin. Additional royal kin were subtly coerced to depart Greece, effectively dismantling any residual networks that might foster opposition or solace. The palace entourage, previously composed of trusted retainers aligned with Constantine, underwent a methodical overhaul, supplanted by individuals harboring animosities toward the former regime. Venizelist appointees who functioned as informants, meticulously documenting Alexander's routines, correspondences, and visitors to forestall any subversive activities. Those loyal to Alexander endured graver repercussions. Numerous allies were incarcerated on contrived allegations of sedition or conspiracy, confined in notorious facilities like Averof prison, or subjected to social ostracism that isolated them from influence, serving as a stark warning to deter further dissent. The political landscape shifted irrevocably on June 26, 1917, when Alexander was compelled to designate Eleftherios Venizelos as the governmental head, a maneuver orchestrated under intense Entente pressure that contravened earlier commitments to retain Zymes, whose compelled resignation exposed the Allies' flexible adherence to pledges. The installation ceremony was marked by palpable strain, with Alexander voicing prompt dissent against Venizelos' doctrines during inaugural consultations, perhaps through vehement dialogues contesting the expedited commitment to war and the subordination of Greek interests to foreign directives. Venizelos, a masterful tactician, countered with explicit warnings of ousting Alexander and instituting a regency council, which would further diminish the monarchy's relevance. The Entente powers interceded through diplomatic communiques, endorsing Alexander's continuance not from benevolence, but to uphold a veneer of steadiness that facilitated their military objectives. Nonetheless, this reprieve came at the cost of pervasive oversight. Venizelos' operatives shadowed Alexander incessantly, transforming the sovereign into a captive within his own opulent confines, where his edicts were systematically disregarded by bureaucrats who deferred to the prime minister or external envoys, eroding any vestige of autonomous rule. Devoid of prior immersion in national governance, his formative experiences centered on mechanical pursuits and military engagements, equipping him with tactical acumen but not administrative finesse. Alexander nevertheless exhibited a resolute commitment to navigating the adversity, endeavoring to embody his father's principles with as much fidelity as circumstances permitted, eschewing outright confrontation that might precipitate his downfall. He infrequently perused official papers prior to affixing his seal, as they arrived prefabricated with predetermined outcomes, demanding perfunctory ratification. His responsibilities contracted to predominantly emblematic gestures, foremost among them excursions to the Macedonian front lines, where Greek contingents collaborated with Allied units against the Central Powers. These ventures served as vital morale enhancers. Alexander traversed prescribed paths, scrutinized entrenchments amid the quagmire and incessant barrages, bestowed commendations and medals upon deserving personnel, and engaged in dialogues that conveyed solidarity and inspiration. For the beleaguered soldiers, Greek and Allied alike, grappling with epidemics, relentless artillery assaults, and the interminable impasse, the sight of their youthful, relatable monarch partaking in their tribulations offered a morale surge, reaffirming a collective mission in the face of desolation, albeit within parameters meticulously curated by Venizelos' administration to synchronize with Entente messaging and preclude any autonomous declarations. King Alexander's ambitious expansion, treaties, wars, and a scandalous marriage in post-WWI Greece. As Greece emerged from the shadows of World War I under the young King Alexander's rule, the nation stood at a pivotal crossroads, balancing ambitious territorial dreams against the harsh realities of international politics and personal royal scandals. Alexander's brief reign from 1917 to 1920 became a tapestry of triumphs and tribulations, where the map of Greece expanded dramatically through hard-won treaties and military campaigns, only to be tested by a devastating war with Turkey that ultimately unraveled many of those gains after his death. Yet amid these grand national endeavors, Alexander's heart pulled him into a deeply personal controversy, a forbidden love affair and marriage that defied royal traditions, sparked outrage across society, and highlighted the tensions between his isolated throne and the rigid expectations of monarchy. This era encapsulated the highs of Hellenic revival and the lows of human vulnerability, shaping Greece's path in profound ways, influencing not just the immediate post-war landscape, but also the long-term identity and stability of the modern Greek state. The period reflected the fragility of newfound power, where diplomatic victories on the global stage coexisted with internal divisions and personal sacrifices, underscoring how a single ruler's decisions could ripple through history, affecting millions in the pursuit of national glory and individual happiness. By the close of World War I in November 1918, Greece had undergone a remarkable transformation from a cautious neutral bystander, initially under King Constantine III's pro-German leaning policies, to a committed and active participant on the side of the Allied powers. This shift was largely orchestrated through the forceful interventions of the Entente during Alexander's reign, which many historians describe as a puppet kingship due to the overwhelming influence of Prime Minister Eleftherios Venizelos and foreign powers. Venizelos, with his unyielding commitment to aligning Greece with Britain, France, and Russia, later joined by the United States, enforced pro-Entente strategies that mobilized Greek resources for the war effort, particularly on the Macedonian front, where Greek troops fought alongside Allied forces against the Central Powers' Bulgarian and German contingents. The Greek military's contributions were significant, including key operations that helped break the stalemate in the Balkans, leading to the armistice with Bulgaria in September 1918 and contributing to the overall collapse of the Central Powers. This active role not only redeemed Greece's earlier neutrality in the eyes of the Allies, but also positioned the country as a deserving beneficiary in the post-war settlements. The war's conclusion unleashed a surge of opportunities for territorial aggrandizement, directly tied to the long-standing nationalist doctrine known as the Megali idea, or great idea. This ideology, originating in the 19th century during Greece's independence from Ottoman rule, envisioned a unified Greek state that encompassed all regions with substantial ethnic Greek populations, stretching from the Ionian Sea to the Black Sea, reviving the cultural and historical legacy of ancient Hellenism and the Byzantine Empire. In 1914, Greece's borders were relatively modest, limited primarily to the southern mainland peninsula, the island of Crete, annexed in 1913, and a scattering of Aegean islands acquired through the Balkan Wars. The population hovered around 4.8 million, concentrated in urban centers like Athens and Thessaloniki, with an economy still recovering from recent conflicts and reliant on agriculture, shipping, and remittances from the Greek diaspora. The Allied victory, however, cracked open the possibility of redrawing these boundaries, allowing Venizelos to advocate aggressively at the Paris Peace Conference for expansions that would nearly double the nation's size and integrate millions more Greeks living under foreign rule, thereby fulfilling a collective dream that had fueled generations of revolutionaries and politicians. The first major milestone in this expansionist phase was the Treaty of Neuilly-sur-Seine, formally signed on November 27, 1919, between the victorious Allied powers and a defeated Bulgaria, which had aligned with the Central Powers during the war. This treaty formed an integral component of the comprehensive Paris peace settlements, designed to dismantle the vestiges of the Austro-Hungarian, German, Ottoman, and Bulgarian empires, while addressing grievances from the conflict and establishing a new order in Europe. For Greece, the accord represented a significant diplomatic and territorial windfall, as Bulgaria was obligated to cede Western Thrace, a strategically vital and economically rich coastal strip along the northern Aegean Sea. This region, extending from the Nestos River in the west to the Evros River in the east, had been a flashpoint of contention since the Balkan Wars, changing hands multiple times and suffering from ethnic strife. Western Thrace encompassed fertile plains ideal for tobacco and grain cultivation, important river valleys for irrigation and transport, and key ports like Alexandroupolis, then Dedeagach, which served as gateways for trade between Europe and Asia via the vital railway linking Constantinople to the Balkans. The cession not only enhanced Greece's agricultural output and commercial reach, but also created a natural buffer zone against potential Bulgarian revanchist ambitions, securing the northeastern frontier and linking Greek Macedonia more seamlessly with the Aegean. Furthermore, Bulgaria was forced to renounce any lingering claims to portions of Macedonia that Greece had already secured in 1913, solidifying those borders, while the Dobruja region was primarily awarded to Romania, indirectly benefiting Greece by diverting Bulgarian focus elsewhere. The treaty's punitive measures extended beyond land transfers, imposing severe military limitations on Bulgaria. Its armed forces were capped at a mere 20,000 volunteers. Conscription was prohibited to prevent rapid mobilization, and the possession of tanks, aircraft, and heavy artillery was banned, effectively neutering its offensive capabilities for years. These restrictions provided Greece with a breathing space to consolidate its gains without immediate threats from the north. Demographically, the acquisition of Western Thrace integrated approximately 250,000 ethnic Greeks who had endured persecution and forced assimilation under Bulgarian occupation during the war, including cultural suppression and economic exploitation. This influx bolstered Greece's population and reinforced national cohesion as returning refugees shared stories of resilience that fueled patriotic fervor. Venizelos, ever the eloquent statesman, proclaimed the treaty as a just recompense for Greece's wartime sacrifices, including the loss of over 5,000 soldiers on the Macedonian front. However, the agreement also planted seeds of future discord as it humiliated Bulgaria, fostering a desire for revisionism that would contribute to alliances with Nazi Germany in World War II. For Alexander, whose role was largely ceremonial, these developments elevated his reign's profile, associating him with a period of national growth despite his limited influence over policy. Following closely on the success of Neuilly was the Treaty of Sèvres, inked on August 10, 1920, which administered a severe dismemberment to the Ottoman Empire and catapulted Greece's territorial aspirations to unprecedented heights. Negotiated in the opulent halls of Sèvres near Paris, amid the fading grandeur of the Ottoman Sultan's representatives, this treaty was crafted to partition the empire's Anatolian heartland and address the Eastern question that had plagued European diplomacy for centuries. For Greece, Sèvres was the pinnacle of Venizelos' diplomatic artistry, as he presented compelling evidence at the Paris Conference, demographic surveys showing Greek majorities in disputed areas, historical documents tracing Hellenic presence back to antiquity, and assurances of stable governance to persuade the Big Four leaders, Woodrow Wilson of the U.S., David Lloyd George of Britain, Georges Clemenceau of France, and Vittorio Orlando of Italy. The treaty granted Greece eastern Thrace, extending up to the Catalja defensive lines just 30 kilometers from Constantinople, incorporating the ancient city of Adrianople, Edirne, with its Byzantine mosques and Ottoman fortifications, and placing Greek troops within striking distance of the Ottoman capital, a symbolic victory that evoked dreams of reclaiming Hagia Sophia. The strategic Aegean islands of Imbros and Tenedos, situated at the mouth of the Dardanelles Strait, were also transferred, fortifying Greece's maritime control over vital sea lanes that connected the Mediterranean to the Black Sea, crucial for trade and military navigation. The most audacious provision was the assignment of the Smyrna zone in western Anatolia to Greek administration for an initial 5-year period, followed by a plebiscite to determine its fate. This mandate encompassed a prosperous enclave around the city of Smyrna, modern Izmir, renowned for its vibrant Greek community, bustling ports handling figs, raisins, and cotton exports, and a cosmopolitan blend of cultures that included Armenians, Jews, and Levantines. Smyrna's Greek population, numbering over 300,000, had long agitated for union with the motherland, and the treaty's terms allowed Greece to exercise full sovereignty, including taxation, policing, and education, effectively treating it as annexed territory. These concessions reflected the Allies' intent to weaken the Ottoman state, promote Christian minorities' self-determination, and reward Greece's loyalty. Under Alexander, the kingdom's expanse ballooned by approximately one-third, from about 120,000 square kilometers to more than 160,000, while the population swelled from 4.8 million to nearly 7 million, absorbing diverse groups like Thracian Muslims and Anatolian Greeks, which posed challenges for integration but enriched cultural tapestry. The news sparked jubilation across Greece. Parades in Athens featured Venizelos as a hero. Schools taught revised histories, emphasizing ancient ties, and newspapers proclaimed a new era of Hellenic dominance, evoking the Byzantine Empire's splendor. However, these acquisitions overstrained military commitments, provoked Ottoman resentment, and alienated Italy and France, who felt Venizelos had overreached, laying groundwork for diplomatic isolation. These territorial acquisitions, while celebrated, ignited the Greco-Turkish War of 1919 to 1922, a ferocious struggle that originated as an Allied sanctioned occupation but escalated into a defining nationalist clash that birthed modern Turkey and inflicted catastrophe on Greece. The conflict's genesis dated to May 15, 1919, when Greek forces, with Entente approval, disembarked in Smyrna to maintain order under the Armistice of Mudros, greeted by ecstatic local Greeks waving flags and chanting hymns, but met with fierce resistance from Turkish nationalists, resulting in violent riots that claimed hundreds of lives in reciprocal massacres, Greeks targeting Turkish quarters, Turks retaliating against Christians. Venizelos, leveraging his Paris platform, framed the landing as protective for vulnerable minorities and enforcement of peace terms, citing Ottoman atrocities during the war, including the Armenian genocide's echoes. By 1920, during Alexander's oversight, though real command lay with Venizelos and generals like Leonidas Paraskevopoulos, Greek armies pressed deeper into Anatolia, seizing Bursa on July 8th, a historic Seljuk capital, and advancing toward Ankara, the provisional base of Mustafa Kemal's revolutionary government. Kemal, a brilliant strategist and former Ottoman officer, unified fractured Turkish elements, regular soldiers, irregular militias, and tribal leaders under the banner of sovereignty, decrying the Greek advance as a neo-crusade intent on carving up Turkey. Bolstered by British arms, though support waned, and Venizelos' zeal, the Greek military notched early victories. The 1920 summer campaign breached Ottoman lines, consolidating the Smyrna enclave and penetrating inland, thwarting Severus's provisions for independent Armenian and Kurdish states by occupying zones earmarked for them. Under Alexander, these advances peaked, with forces approaching the Sakarya River by mid-1921, merely 80 kilometers from Ankara, buoying hopes of crushing Kemal's resistance and perhaps even claiming Constantinople. The king embodied unity, touring battlefields in uniform, pinning medals on heroes, and delivering speeches that blended royal gravitas with patriotic fire, even as his private turmoil simmered. Nevertheless, fortunes reversed catastrophically. Kemal's revamped army, fueled by patriotic ardor and Soviet aid, arms and gold from Bolshevik Russia opposing imperialism, initiated counterstrikes. The battles of Inonu in January and April 1921 repelled Greek thrusts, exacting steep tolls, thousands dead in frozen terrains, and revealing vulnerabilities. Greek logistics faltered across 300-plus kilometer supply chains from Aegean ports, prone to Kemalist guerrillas sabotaging railways and ambushing convoys. Venizelos, undaunted, advocated an all-out assault, but the Sakarya battle from August 23 to September 13, 1921, devolved into a 22-day bloodbath along the river, with Greeks enduring 18,000 casualties amid scorching heat, dysentery outbreaks, and unyielding Turkish defenses fortified by trenches and machine guns. Though no clear victor emerged, the engagement depleted Greek reserves and morale, halting their offensive. Post-Alexander's 1920 death, the 1922 debacle unfolded. Kemal's grand offensive, commencing August 26 at Afyonkarahisar, smashed Greek positions, exploiting exhaustion and political instability after Venizelos' electoral defeat. The retreat degenerated into pandemonium, with soldiers fleeing toward Smyrna, abandoning equipment and civilians. The Smyrna catastrophe in September 1922 saw the city ablaze. Fires, likely set by Turkish irregulars, though debated, consuming Greek and Armenian districts, killing 30,000 to 100,000 in massacres and infernos, as refugees crammed docks pleading for evacuation by Allied ships. Turkish troops retook Smyrna on September 9th, expelling remnants. The war ended with the Mudanya Armistice on October 11th, 1922, and Lausanne Treaty on July 24th, 1923, abrogating Sèvres, stripping Greece of Smyrna, eastern Thrace, Imbros, and Tenedos, retained but demilitarized, and enforcing a harrowing population swap. 1.2 million Orthodox Christians from Turkey to Greece, 400,000 Muslims inversely, uprooting communities, causing deaths from exposure and disease, and straining Greece's economy with refugees. Dubbed the Asia Minor catastrophe in Greek lore, it traumatized the nation, birthing refugee slums and irredentist sentiments. Yet, under Alexander, the war's nascent stages glittered with promise, temporarily swelling Greece before 1922's reversal obliterated those achievements, etching a narrative of hubris and loss. Interwoven with these geopolitical upheavals was a poignant personal event on July 8, 1920, when Alexander journeyed to the freshly incorporated Western Thrace, a landscape teeming with Greek Orthodox heritage yet marred by decades of Bulgarian dominion that had imposed linguistic bans and economic exploitation. The visit's zenith was the formal rechristening of the region's chief municipality from Didiagac, a moniker of Turkish etymology signifying grandfather's tree, redolent of Ottoman suzerainty, to Alexandroupolis, denoting Alexander's city in Greek. Proclaimed amid the king's attendants with throngs assembling for speeches, brass bands, and flag-waving processions, this gesture paid homage to Alexander while advancing Hellenization policies that sought to efface alien nomenclature and instill national pride. The town, pivotal as a rail nexus bridging continental Europe to Asian thresholds via the Orient Express line, had functioned as a Bulgarian bulwark since 1913, but transitioned via Neuilly's stipulations. The renaming expunged vestiges of subjugation, promoting unity and progress. Alexander inspected the harbor's docks for shipping potential, mingled with residents sharing tales of liberation, and reviewed infrastructural enhancements like road repairs and school constructions. Presently, Alexandroupolis flourishes as Evros Prefecture's administrative core, a bustling port with universities and museums. Its appellation an enduring monument to the monarch who presided over Greece's ephemeral apex, symbolizing personal legacy amid collective aspiration. However, as frontiers evolved and legions mobilized, Alexander's intimate sphere was engulfed by a liaison flouting norms, culminating in his 1919 contentious nuptials, a bond conflicting with regal edicts and fomenting uproars, imperiling his sovereignty. It commenced in 1915 at an extravagant Athens gala convened by General Theodore Ypsilantis, wherein Alexander reacquainted with Aspasia Manos, a juvenile associate newly repatriated from scholastic sojourns in France and Switzerland. Aspasia, progeny of Colonel Petros Manos, Constantine's stablemaster and esteemed martial persona, was lauded for her captivating allure, acumen, and grace, contemporaries portraying her as refined with ebony tresses, vivid orbs, and cosmopolitan polish refined overseas. Aged 21, Alexander succumbed instantaneously, his extroverted disposition impelling ardent pursuit. That season he trailed her to Spetses Isle for repose, courting with tenacious allure, notwithstanding her preliminary rebuffs. Aspasia, cognizant of his notoriety as a libertine with antecedent dalliances amongst Athens' aristocracy, demurred, cautious of ephemeral ardors. Yet Alexander's genuineness prevailed. By annum's terminus they covertly betrothed, their affinity intensifying amidst belligerent vicissitudes. The tragic death of Alexander, October 25, 1920. The shock to royal medicine. King Alexander's death stands as one of the most poignant and memorable episodes in his tragically short life, not merely for its suddenness and inherent drama, but for the profound political ramifications that rippled far beyond the confines of the Greek royal family. Occurring at the age of 27, this event unfolded in a manner that blended personal misfortune with national catastrophe, illustrating how a seemingly minor incident could cascade into a series of crises that altered the course of Greek history. The circumstances surrounding his demise, rooted in an unexpected animal attack, compounded by medical missteps and exacerbated by political intransigence, highlighted the vulnerabilities of even the most elevated figures in an era of turbulent change. It exposed the intersections of health, power, and diplomacy, where a king's physical well-being became inextricably linked to the stability of his throne and the fate of his nation. In the broader context of post-World War I Europe, where monarchies were already under strain from Republican movements and nationalist upheavals, Alexander's passing served as a stark reminder of how fragile royal institutions could be, especially in a country like Greece, still navigating its identity after independence from Ottoman rule and recent expansions through the Balkan Wars. This incident didn't just end a reign, it ignited a succession crisis, toppled a government, and contributed to military defeats that reshaped borders and displaced populations, leaving an indelible mark on the collective Greek memory as a symbol of lost potential and unforeseen consequences. The sequence of events leading to Alexander's death began innocuously on October 2, 1920, during what should have been a leisurely stroll through the expansive grounds of Tatoi Palace, the royal family's summer residence nestled in the forested hills north of Athens. Tatoi, with its sprawling estates, vineyards, and gardens, had long served as a retreat from the political pressures of the capital, a place where Alexander could find solace amid his isolated kingship. On this particular day, the young king was accompanied by his beloved German shepherd, Fritz, a loyal companion that provided a sense of normalcy in his otherwise constrained life. As they wandered near the palace's vineyards, an altercation erupted involving one of the estate's domesticated Barbary macaques, a type of monkey native to North Africa, but kept as an exotic pet by the vineyard steward. These monkeys, known for their intelligence, social hierarchies, and occasionally aggressive behavior, especially when feeling threatened or protecting territory, were not uncommon in European aristocratic circles as curiosities, but they carried risks due to their sharp teeth and potential to transmit infections. The incident started when the macaque either initiated an attack on Fritz or was provoked by the dog's protective instincts, leading to a chaotic scuffle between the two animals. Shaban Alexander, ever the hands-on and impulsive individual shaped by his mechanical interests and military background, instinctively intervened to separate them, placing himself directly in harm's way. In the midst of this effort, a second macaque joined the fray, lunging at the king and inflicting deep bites on his left leg and upper torso. The wounds were severe. The monkey's teeth tore through skin and muscle, creating puncture marks that bled profusely and exposed underlying tissues to contaminants from the animal's mouth, which harbored bacteria common in primates. Palace servants, alerted by the commotion, perhaps shouts from Alexander or the animal's screeches, rushed to the scene, managing to drive off the monkeys with sticks or by creating distractions, but not before the damage was done. Alexander, though in pain, downplayed the severity, reflecting his stoic personality and desire to avoid public alarm in an already volatile political climate where any sign of weakness could be exploited by Venizelist opponents or royalist factions. Immediate medical attention was administered at Tatoy, where the wounds were cleaned with antiseptics available at the time, likely iodine or carbolic acid solutions, and bandaged to stem the bleeding. However, a critical oversight occurred. The bites were not cauterized, a common procedure in the early 20th century for animal-inflicted injuries to seal the wounds and kill potential pathogens through heat application, often using a hot iron or chemical agents like silver nitrate. This decision stemmed from a combination of factors: the medical team's hesitation to employ such a painful and disfiguring method on the king without absolute necessity, Alexander's own insistence that the matter was trivial, and perhaps an underestimation of the risks posed by monkey bites, which were less understood than those from dogs or cats. Alexander explicitly requested that the incident remain confidential, fearing it would fuel media sensationalism or political intrigue, especially as Greece was deeply engaged in the ongoing Greco-Turkish War and domestic elections loomed. He continued his duties, but by that evening signs of complication emerged. The wounds began to swell and redden, indicative of infection setting in, as bacteria from the macaque's saliva, potentially including streptococci or staphylococci, proliferated in the warm, moist environment of the bites. Alexander developed a high fever, spiking to over 104 degrees Fahrenheit, 40 degrees Celsius, accompanied by chills, sweating, and general malaise. This progressed rapidly into sepsis, a life-threatening systemic infection where bacteria entered the bloodstream, triggering widespread inflammation, organ stress, and toxin release. Symptoms intensified. Delirium set in, with Alexander experiencing confusion and hallucinations. His pulse raced, blood pressure fluctuated, and pain radiated from the wounds, now pus-filled and necrotic. The royal physicians, including prominent Greek doctors, like those from the Evangelismos Hospital in Athens, convened urgently but faced a dilemma. Amputation of the affected leg was seriously considered as a last resort to halt the infection spread, a procedure that had saved lives in wartime but carried high risk of shock, further infection, or death from blood loss in an era before widespread antibiotics. Penicillin wouldn't be discovered until 1928. No surgeon dared assume responsibility for such a drastic measure on the sovereign, fearing historical blame if it failed or maimed him permanently. Instead, they opted for conservative treatments, repeated wound drainages, applications of poultices to draw out pus, and administration of available remedies like quinine for fever or arsenic-based compounds for infection, which were largely ineffective against sepsis. Alexander's condition deteriorated over weeks, his body weakened by the relentless bacterial assault, compounded by the stresses of his reign, constant surveillance, family separation, and the burdens of a figurehead role. In a heart-rending turn as sepsis advanced, Alexander's thoughts turned to his family, exiled since 1917 under Entente pressure. On October 19th, in a state of delirium, he repeatedly called out for his mother, Queen Sophia, whose nurturing presence he craved in his vulnerability. Sophia, residing in Switzerland with Constantine and other relatives, was informed through diplomatic channels and pleaded desperately to return, offering to nurse her son personally despite the political risks. However, the Venizelos government, wary of royalist resurgence and viewing the exiles as threats to their regime, categorically refused her entry, citing national security amid the war and upcoming elections. This decision, cold and calculated, ignored humanitarian appeals and international norms for family reunions and crises, reflecting the deep animosities of the national schism. In a partial concession, the government permitted Dowager Queen Olga, widow of King George the Ruther and Alexander's paternal grandmother, to travel from her exile in Russia via circuitous routes due to the Bolshevik Revolution's chaos to Athens. Olga, a resilient figure of Russian Romanov descent, who had long embodied Greek royal continuity, embarked immediately, but stormy seas in the Mediterranean delayed her voyage by crucial days. She arrived too late. Alexander succumbed to septic shock around 4 p.m. on October 25, 1920, his body ravaged by multi-organ failure, kidneys and liver overwhelmed by toxins, heart straining under the load. News reached the exiled family via terse telegrams that night, plunging them into grief compounded by helplessness and rage at the government's cruelty. The funeral arrangements underscored the isolation and political sensitivity surrounding Alexander's death. 2 days later, on October 27th, his body, embalmed to preserve dignity, was transported from Tatoi to the Metropolitan Cathedral of Athens, the neoclassical edifice in the city center, symbolizing Greek orthodoxy and national unity. There it lay in state, allowing limited public viewing amid heavy security to prevent royalist demonstrations. The state funeral on October 29th was a somber affair, devoid of the full pomp befitting a king, as the government barred the exiled royals from attending, fearing their presence would rally opposition. Olga, arriving just in time to mourn privately, was the sole family representative, her presence a poignant link to the dynasty's past. Foreign dignitaries filled the void. Serbia's Prince Regent Alexander, future King Alexander I of Yugoslavia, attended with his sister Princess Helen, Alexander's aunt through marriage, representing Balkan solidarity. Sweden's Crown Prince Gustav Adolf came with his uncle Prince Eugene, Duke of Nurka, honoring Scandinavian ties via the Greek monarchy's Danish origins. Britain was represented by Admiral Sir George Hope, commander of Mediterranean fleets, and France by Admiral Dumesnil, underscoring Entente influence. Athens's diplomatic corps, including ambassadors from major powers, completed the assembly, turning the ceremony into an international affair that highlighted Greece's precarious position. The service featured Orthodox rites, chants by black-robed priests, incense wafting through the cathedral's domes, and eulogies praising Alexander's youth and potential. Before the cortege processed to Tatoi for interment in the royal cemetery, amid autumn foliage and guarded paths, the burial plot nestled among pines marked his final rest, but the gravestone's inscription revealed ongoing legitimacy disputes. The epitaph on Alexander's tomb deviated markedly from those of other Greek kings, who were inscribed as King of the Hellenes, Prince of Denmark, affirming their sovereign status and Glucksburg lineage. Alexander's read, Alexander, son of the King of the Hellenes, Prince of Denmark. He reigned in place of his father from June 14th, 1917 to October 25th, 1920. This phrasing, insisted upon by the family, underscored their view that his rule was regency-like, illegitimate due to Entente coercion, preserving Constantine's claim. As his beloved sister Queen Helen of Romania later reflected, Alexander shared this sentiment of impermanence, which partly explained his morganatic marriage to Aspasia Manos, a union born of personal defiance against a throne he never fully embraced, seeking authenticity and love amid artificial power. Alexander's demise triggered a royal medical shock with far-reaching political consequences, precipitating a succession crisis that destabilized the monarchy and contributed to regime collapse and territorial reversals. His childless state, his daughter Alexandra, born posthumously, and the morganatic marriage invalidated heirs under dynastic laws, barring descendants from succession due to unequal status. Parliament debated excluding Constantine and George, but favored monarchy, proposing another royal. On October 29, 1920, the Greek minister in Bern offered the throne to Prince Paul, Alexander's brother. Paul declined, asserting neither father nor brother had abdicated, rendering his ascension unlawful and unethical. The vacancy fueled the November 14, 1920 elections, transforming them into a royalist-Venizelist showdown, with Republicans gaining ground. Amid the Greco-Turkish War, royalists triumphed, ousting Venizelos, who lost his seat and exiled himself, and installing Demetrios Rallis as prime minister. Rallis appointed Olga regent until Constantine's return, confirmed by a December plebiscite with overwhelming support, over 99% in a manipulated vote. Constantine's restoration revived royalism but alienated allies who withdrew support, viewing him as pro-German. This isolation doomed the Anatolian campaign. Without British aid, Greek forces faltered against Kemal, leading to 1922 defeats, Smyrna's fall, and the catastrophe, losing Sèvres gains, incurring 25,000 military deaths and civilian horrors. Alexander's death during elections undermined Venizelos, eroding Allied backing and enabling Constantine's return, which sealed military failure. And that's the remarkable and often complex story of Prince Alexander of Greece, whose life continues to resonate through history. What are your thoughts about Prince Alexander of Greece's journey and legacy? Do you feel history has been fair, or has Prince Alexander of Greece been misunderstood by generations? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, remember to give us a like and subscribe to our channel for more compelling stories from history. Thank you so much for watching.